Gary, welcome to Waterstones.
Thanks for having me.
We are right on the very top of our building here, which has a very impressive view of the London skyline. And if you sort of crane your head round to the left, you can see some of those big buildings. You'd have to really crane your head round, but a lot of those big city buildings that feature in your book, The Trading Game. I thought we should probably start with that title first of all, because the trading game was an actual game. Could you explain briefly what the trading game was and also why it was really the only route for you into trading?
Yeah, so the trading game was a competition run at universities by Citibank, the big American bank. In the early 2000s, I don't know when, I'm pretty sure they've stopped running it now, but I don't know when they stopped running it. And it's basically a card game, like a betting card game. So I guess a bit like poker. But it's designed to emulate the way that trading works in financial markets. And I heard about this game when I was an LSE student in 2006, late 2006. That was my second year at LSE, the London School of Economics. So London School of Economics, for those that don't know, is a very prestigious, essentially a finance school nowadays. People go there to try and become bankers. And I was there from 2005. I was studying maths and economics. And I kind of naively thought that you go to university, you study really hard, you get good grades, you get a good job. And I was rudely awakened, let's say, at LSE, which is described in the book, basically. My first year went kind of pretty normal, studied, did my exams, and then I turned up for second year, and basically everyone at LSE had gone completely mental. So they were just obsessed with trading, and not just trade investment banking in general. The way that manifested was basically everybody was talking in these three-letter acronyms: CDSs, CDOs, MBS, M&A, and I had no idea what none of this stuff meant. And one of my friends told me second year is internship year, and the way you get an internship, the only way to get a job is to get an internship, and the only way to get an internship is to apply for like 30 banks, and you've got to send them your CV and cover letter. And that's when I realised that all of these guys, LSE has a lot of very wealthy students. That's when I realised that a lot of these guys had basically been like prepping for this cover letter since they were like, I don't know, 6 years old. They'd all been like president of the Junior United Nations, or like trekked through the Sahara Desert for charity, or played the oboe in the Royal Albert Hall. And I was like, when I was a teenager, I was working at DFS, which is a sofa shop in Beckton, next to a sewage works, fluffing pillows, and trying to become a grime MC. This is my sort of, and I was like, this is probably not going to look good on a cover. So it was really sort of pretty depressing for me, because like I was a really good student. I had really good grades, and I didn't study that hard, but I thought that if you do well in your exams, you'll get a good job. And I found out that it doesn't really work like that. But sort of luckily, this one boy in the year above from Grimsby, I'd never even met him before, wandered up in the library one day and said, Citibank hire one trader a year, do this card game. And it's basically just like a maths game. And he just briefly described the game to me. And I entered that game, and I won the game, and I became a trader for Citibank. And that's the origin of this book.
It must be so weird looking back on that moment, as you say, because your path to LSE even was unconventional, and even more unconventional to find yourself as a trader at Citibank. But that moment of luck, I suppose, of that game existing, especially if it doesn't exist now, you must feel, I don't know, do you believe in fate, or does it sort of feel like it was always meant to happen that way, or do you just feel very lucky?
I think when you sit and look back at it now, it's easy to sort of talk about it as fate. And I was also expelled from school when I was 16. This is in the book, and it's that could have ended up with me having a criminal record, which I didn't, which I would never have gotten if I had that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think in a way, I should sort of try and be fair to young Gary. Young Gary was insane. Like young Gary, you've read the book, like he was unbelievably competitive. And I suspect if this random trapdoor had not opened, he would have found the window open around the back somewhere. Because you've read the book, like, and so I wrote it. Obviously that was me, but I like to think I'm a little bit more chill now. But he wasn't the kind of guy that works really, really hard, but he was the kind of guy that makes it happen. Because really, I don't think it's a coincidence that the same guy who found this unorthodox route into the bank 3 years later was the best trader in the world at that bank. I acknowledge that there was if you come from where I come from, you need luck and skill.
Yep.
You know, you definitely need both. But you know, it wasn't all luck. There was a little bit of a trickiness in there which got me through.
It's really interesting hearing you talk about Gary as almost like a character in a book. The book is really engaging to read, and it moves at a hell of a pace, and there are these fantastic characters that we meet through it. But was this your first, I suppose, I wonder about your approach to writing the book, presumably the first book you've ever written, and I wonder how you approached telling your own story and whether there were any sort of influences on how you were sitting down to write that.
I'd never thought of writing, I studied maths and economics. You know, my sister studied creative writing, so it's kind of like she's the creative one.
Yeah.
I'm the numbers guy. And I never really thought of writing a book. I started writing articles about economics back in 2020. I got called up by a literary agent, and he was like, "You ever thought about writing a book?" And I was like, "That sounds like a lot of work, mate." And, but as soon as he said that, like, I'd hung up the phone, and I had the very clear image in my head of what I would write if I would write something, which is I wanted to write a very first-person, experiential, emotional account of what it is really like to be on the trading floor, because I can't watch Wolf of Wall Street, to be honest. I can't watch it. Like, I've seen, it's too glorified. There's these stereotypes of traders, but I wanted you to really meet these real people. And you know, I worked with some terrible people, but I didn't work with anyone who was like irredeemably evil. You know, these are real people. They're complex characters. They go into the space for a reason. And what I really wanted to capture was kind of the madness, but also the sadness of the space. So I wanted to, so really when I was writing it, and you know, this is the first time I've done any sort of creative writing, I was reliving it, really. Go back into that space, really inhabit that space, live it again, and just, you know, I think really for me, it was kind of like, it felt like when I went through that, I was not very well supported and I was quite alone. And it kind of felt like going through it again with like older me, with younger me, kind of encouraging him to just talk a bit about how you felt, you know, a little bit. Yeah. So, that's how I wrote it, really, trying to live through it again.
It's really interesting you mentioned The Wolf of Wall Street, because I think some people will obviously equate the two things. I too struggle watching that film because it feels like, as you say, glorification and celebration. It's almost too entertaining as a film. It's too slick because it's morally dubious. But you look at the world that you were working in, as you say, with sort of quite naive eyes as you come into it. I actually think that a lot of your success early on was to do with your naivety and your charm. You were clearly a charming young lad as you came in there. You were doing things like getting coffees and doing that kind of intern stuff, but really applying yourself to it, which meant that they wanted you to come back and work for them. Was there a way in which, as you say, you were being a bit kinder to your younger self? Were you kind of impressed at how hard you worked to get that foot in the door and make the most of that opportunity?
God knows I couldn't do it now. I look back at how, I think, well, I mean, you've read the book till the end, right? So you will know sort of, when I went in, I was that kind of kid. And I know, this is not just me. There's loads of kids like this from where I'm from. They'll make it happen. They'll find a way. You know, it doesn't matter what it takes. They'll make it work. And like, there's one story early on in the book, which is when I'm super, I've been there, it's my internship, 1 week internship. And I worked my tits off on this 1 week internship, really going for it, trying to impress everyone. And then on the last day, the boss man says, all right, I'm buying burgers for the whole floor. You have to go and get orders from everyone and get everybody's burgers to the floor. And I'm kind of like, fine. And it's an act, right? Because I'm thinking, how am I going to do that? And then when I come back, I managed to do it. I get like 150 burgers onto the trading floor, somehow. And then I'm like knackered. And they're all sort of like, they're all sort of laughing at me. And then young me is saying like, oh, I don't care, I don't give a shit, whatever. They're paying me like £700 a week to get burgers, whatever. But you can kind of see he is a little bit hurt and he's repressing it. And I think that is sort of, I was raised, and I think a lot of, especially young men are raised, be successful, make it work. And a lot of people, myself included, in order to do that, repress a lot. We go through a lot and we just put it aside. And you sort of see the effect it has over time, basically.
The thing with the burgers is very funny because, of course, as you say, that you were being set up to fail. Like, it should be impossible for you to get that many burgers at lunchtime. And it takes you back actually to the original trading game, because you had the same experience there where in the final they actually fixed the game so that you couldn't win. And that was because they wanted to test what your reaction to that would be. And you just kept going and going and going and going because and that was actually how you won the game, wasn't it? Because they could see that in you.
Yeah, there's this weird, I mean, in a sense, you know, the book's called The Trading Game. There's obviously this literal trading game, but I think there's a lot of sort of ways you can take it. And that game, there's two games going on there, right? There's the literal game, but they're playing me because they've rigged the game behind my back without telling me. And they keep doing it. I keep finding myself in these sort of situations. Like they're sort of, I think you're right in what you say. They were kind of charmed by this naivety because kids like me, from where I'm from, don't turn up on the trading floor anymore. And also, like, one thing that really struck me when I was like a young trader was how very quickly everyone on the trading floor was like, we want this guy. And I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And I was very aware that I had no idea what I was doing. And it was kind of a bit scary and a bit comical. Like, why am I so popular when I have no idea what's going on? And the irony is, I went on to become this very successful trader extreme. So even though I knew nothing, they were the guys who were right in a way. And I think there was this, in a way, they knew better than me the kind of talent. They were able to see more than me the talent that I had. But then you see that there's this power imbalance throughout the whole book, which is I was clearly very, very talented, but I don't have any of the power. And you kind of see me sort of naively hitting hurdle after hurdle and like every time finding some bizarre way, which increasingly bizarre as the book gets on, I think, way to get through it. But yeah, I think it's, in a way, for me, it's kind of a metaphor for the way society is built, you know, which is that, you know, kids like me, from my sort of background, we work so hard. And then, you know, there's this one scene in the book when I get my first bonus. And yeah, it was a lot more than I was expecting. And, you know, when I was a kid, and lots of kids will live like this, you go to the shop and you buy the cheapest thing. The cheapest thing. And when I was at uni, I ate for lunch every day 2 Scotch eggs from Sainsbury's. And then you turn up at 21 years old and you're getting paid like nearly £500,000. And I just look back and I think, all those fucking Scotch eggs. And it makes you kind of feel, but it makes you feel like the way that we, poor people, live our lives, the whole thing is a game. You know, these guys barely even work. They live lives of luxury. We work our tits off to eat Scotch eggs for lunch. You know, so the way that I got played with this burger is the way that I got played with this game. It's kind of, I think it's a, you know, it's a microcosm of the way our society is built, I think.
You mentioned that sort of the huge bonuses that came as a result of your hard work, and you were almost sort of paralysed by the inability to actually spend that money. As you say, if you grow up poor, when you get given that money, it's sort of almost not real. And you describe very well the sort of unhappiness actually that comes from being given that kind of wealth, living the kind of life you were living, going to different parts of the world as part of your job, but really none of that actually making you happy or filling the void.
You know, it's a funny one. This didn't get into the book actually, but I remember having, suddenly it's come back to me, one conversation I had with the girl who I was dating at the time, and I got this first big bonus. And it's one of the first few moments when I sort of actually thought about, why does this money not make me happy? And I think when I don't want to glamorise poverty at all, but when you're young and you come from where you've got nothing, everything's like a positive bet because you've got nothing to lose. And then suddenly you get given this money and it's like, I've never had anything. You know, when I was a kid, I lived in a tiny little bedroom with my brother in a bunk bed, and everything I owned was in a random shelf, not like a shelf from like a chest of drawers that had been taken out of just under the bed. Everything I owned was in that drawer. And then suddenly someone gives you £500,000. You know, like I didn't have my own, you know, I'd never owned anything. When I was scared of shops. I didn't know how shops worked. I'd never been in the shop. So, and then suddenly you get £500,000. And you know what do you do? You know, and then there's this scene in the book where they say, oh, buy something for your dad. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. You know, because like, I've never bought anything for anyone. They're like, what does your dad like? I'm like, oh, he likes football. You buy him Sky Sports then. I buy him Sky Sports. But what they didn't know was, before I was working at the bank, I used to go with my dad to Leyton Orient every week. You know, it was £23 a year for a season ticket for kids. And we used to sit next to each other and watch the game with Harry Samby, who's also a character in the book. But when I was working at the bank, I didn't have time for that anymore. I was so busy. So then they think that this money is like a path for me to bring happiness to my family. They don't realise that actually it's taking me away from my family.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would wake up on Saturdays and I'd see my dad watching the midday kickoff on Sky Sports, and it would make me so unhappy. And it was just this, but it's another one of those things that you just kind of, you compartmentalise, and you hide away the things that you're losing, and you focus on the things that you're winning. But I think the book, it captures it very well. This sort of descent into unhappiness, and also perhaps sort of madness that came. So what do you do? I think there's this, but it's not just me. Even though I come from a poor background, I think there's this. That trading floor is a room full of people who, to some degree, have traded their happiness for money, and are trying to trade it back.
Yeah.
And that's why you see them. They go and they buy, amazing new bike, and they never ride it. They buy a whole new set of skis. They're trying to buy back the happiness and the youth that they've traded away. And it's a big thing I wanted to get across in the book is the sadness of these space. That is a room full of very unhappy men, and very wealthy unhappy men. And what does that mean that we've constructed our society in that way?
There are some, as I said earlier, fascinating characters in the book that you worked with. And I wonder if we could talk about a couple of them. The first of them is the man who sort of frames the book, because he's there at the beginning and he's there right at the end as well, which is Caleb. Could you tell us a little bit about Caleb and why he's such an incredible character? Yes,
I mean, Caleb was the guy who ran the trading game competition. And very smooth, charming, charismatic man. He was the youngest ever managing director at Citibank, which is like a really big deal. And he sort of comes in, he's this massive guy, larger than life. And he recognised very quickly, Gary's like really, really smart, let's get this guy in. And of course, I'm just like a little kid basically, and I see this guy like he's a super rich trader, like he's the guy, I want to be like this guy. And then he hires me, he brings me in, and then very suddenly he leaves, and he leaves, and it's like, because he's in a sense he's like lived the dream. And another big theme of the book is, do you leave? Can you leave? Do people leave? And this guy does it. And then that sort of, but as it develops, it turns out that this departure was not as simple as it seems, and perhaps he had appeared to be able to leave, but he wasn't able to leave, and this sort of, I don't want to give too much away, but it raises questions essentially about appearances. This guy appeared so seductive and so complete, and yet he was unable to leave, despite being super rich. And this mirrors, of course, my own journey, which my own beginning of questioning, should you leave? And of course, that raises bigger questions about, really, I think, the effects of money and the effects of greed and the effects of power on the individual. And I think we all face these questions on some level. We all pursue money and have questions about, should I work harder? Should I spend more time with my family? But he was my first ever boss, and he was also my final boss. He was not my boss the whole time. And our relationship went on a journey, let's say.
Yeah.
I don't want to give too much away, but the readers can experience what I experienced.
Yeah, because there is something almost mafia-like in the sort of the threat of you not basically being able to, as you say, are you going to get paid?
Yeah.
Is what the question you keep asking in the book. Because if you try to leave the job, your bonus, for those who don't understand, is not simply a big check that you get and that's it. It's paid incrementally over a period of time. Yeah. So that means if you say, I'm leaving the job, goodbye bonus.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you actually get the money that you're supposed to get?
Yeah. I wanted to sort of, one thing I really wanted to do with this book, I think, like, I was quite lucky, like, from a literary perspective. You've got a nice opportunity here, because I grew up in East London, not far from these skyscrapers. And then I work in this space. And these two spaces physically are not that far apart from one another. But they're completely different worlds, right? So you want to play with like the contrast. Me going in, we talk about waking up like and having a shower with this little hand hose from Argos that you plug into the taps, and then like going into these massive skyscrapers, and then working with these millionaires, and then going home to your like crowded house and this kind of thing. But the opening scene of the book so is basically me being threatened by this character Caleb, and it's very mafia-esque, And when I was a kid, I come from a very poor background. I grew up in a pretty rough area. I was expelled from school for selling drugs. I wouldn't say I was a drug dealer or ever a criminal, but these elements existed around me in the street I grew up. You know, there were drug dealers and there were criminals. Like, I grew up with these people. And, you know, I did the right thing. I studied hard, I got a good job, and you kind of think that you're going that way, you're choosing another path. And then I quickly became very senior at Citibank, and then you suddenly see, like, well, when you're doing what they want you to do, everything's fine. As soon as you start varying, suddenly these guys are acting just like the same way the drug dealers on the street act.
Right.
And what I wanted to do was, you know, collapse that physical space and say, listen, these people may look very different, and they may run your life, and they may have all the power. But once you dig a bit beneath the surface, you know, are they any better than us? Are they any, you know? And, you know, my experience of those two spaces was, you know, they're basically the same, you know, and I think that is an empowering message, you know, to people from both sides of the coin, which is like, you know, if you come from a poor background, don't think these people are better than you, because they're not. And if you come from a rich background, don't think you're better than those people, because that can get you in trouble, you know. And I think that's very, very relevant in this society we live in, increasing inequality, you know, and people who know the work I do outside of this book will know this is something I'm very passionate about. I think it's a massive problem.
One of the fascinating characters in the book is Billy, who's quite an enigma, but tell me a little bit about him and why he was so important.
So Billy was the only trader on my desk who didn't go to university. And when I started working there in 2008, he was already in his mid to late 40s. He's from Liverpool. He's a Scouser. He had a strong Scouse accent, and he, from a very working class background, he started working as a teenager on the cash desk at Halifax. And he's managed to work his way up over the course of like 30 years to being a senior trader at Citibank. And when I turn up, he's had a rough couple of years. He's not done very well. And he basically hates everyone on the trading floor. He thinks that they're really posh, and people are like, who's this guy? Who's this dickhead, basically? He's not making any money. Yeah. But I obviously, because I see like he's from sort of similar background to me, and I kind of, I think like this is a guy I want to make friends with. There's one scene really early in the book when some guys on another desk keep playing music, and he keeps saying, "Can you turn that music down?" And they keep turning it back. Can you turn that music down? And eventually, he just pulls the speakers of the wires of the speaker through the desk and just snips them. And I was like, and then the guys come, what's going on? And then I was like, this is the guy I want to hang out with. But suddenly, in 2008 crisis, this guy just makes an absolute unbelievable fortune. And it turns out he's been sitting there just betting that the world's going to blow up for years. And we formed a very close bond, and he sort of takes me under his wing. And he kind of becomes, I guess, a bit of a spiritual guru to me in a way, and also a trading guide, because he's a very, very good trader. And after I have my first big loss, which is into my second year as a trader, I instinctively went back to the textbooks. I started bringing my textbooks into the office. And I'm sitting next to Billy by this point. I'm like Billy's junior. And I'm reading the textbooks every day. After like the second or third day, Billy just can't take it anymore, just slaps the textbooks out of my hand, straight into the bin. And he's like, what the fuck are you doing? You're not a kid anymore. You're not going to find out the key to the world in those textbooks. If you want to know what's happening in the world, if you want to know what's happening in the economy, go home and ask your mum what's happening in her economy. Ask your friends' mums. Walk down the high street and look at what's happening. The shops are closing down. Look at the homeless people. Is there more or less of them? Look at what's being advertised on the tube. And he basically says to me, if you want to understand the economy, time comes, you have to go out and look at the fucking economy, basically. You can't just read about it in books. And that was, a big moment for me, where it sort of, and in a sense, is sort of the catalyst for everything that's happened since, which is my willingness to sort of step out of the theory and into the world, and that sort of what propels me into becoming the very successful trader I became.
Yeah, because you had a good sense, as you say, of what was actually happening. So that after that crash that you mentioned, where Billy makes a lot of money, everyone's expecting for things to return to normal.
Yeah.
But your sense told you it's not going to return to normal. It's broken. Its interest rates are going to stay low. Everything's going to stay down here. And that was how you made your millions, as a trader, because you kept betting against what everybody else was expecting. We were talking about the moral dubiousness of something like Wolf of Wall Street. Obviously, looking back now, making huge amounts of money when you're doing it on a sort of about wealth inequality, as you say, that's what you could see. How did it feel writing about that? And sort of now, obviously, you're an activist in terms of economics, but how does it sort of square with you, sort of having made that money basically off the back of a broken economy?
Yeah, there's this one scene in the book which I think is quite good, to say myself, which is where I kind of have this penny drop moment where I finally realise this is it. This is it. This is what's going to happen, which is, you know, I start to realise, like, it's 2011, which is the year of the sovereign debt crisis. So, like, all of the big governments in Europe basically collapse financially. And I start to see, before this has happened, like, these governments are going to go bankrupt. And I start to see the similarity between them and my friends families that are losing their houses, going into debt. And I start thinking, okay, well, all the ordinary people are losing their assets, going into debt. Governments losing their assets are going into debt. Where's it going? And then I'm surrounded by these millionaires. So, okay, what we have here is, you know, there's a shift of power, there's a shift of ownership, there's a shift of wealth. It's being drained out of the middle class, out of governments, into the rich. Well, what are the rich going to do with that? They're going to buy more assets, which means it's going to accelerate, which means that the middle class will become completely impoverished. There'll be an explosion in poverty in this country. Governments will be bankrupted. It's going to, you know, it's going to cause basic collapse of Western society. And then there's this penny drop where it's like, I know what I've got to do. I've got to buy green Eurodollars. You look at it back and you're like, you know, here is a very talented young kid. He's obviously smart. He's figured out a really important thing. And his instinct is monetize. And that is the person that I was trained to, that was my job. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's sort of, I think it's, when I look back, I don't think about it morally. I'm a mathematician in my heart. I think, listen, this is the society we've built. You know, there are people whose job it is to manage our economy, and they get paid 50 grand a year. And there's people whose job it is to bet on our economy, and they get paid £2 million a year. Right? If that is how you construct your economy, what do you think is going to happen? You know, and I've walked away now from that money, and now I sort of try to prevent, you know, our economy collapsing. Not doing the best job of it so far, but I'm still going for it. I'm not out here trying to be Mahatma Gandhi. I'm not a moral philosopher. You know, what I wanted to do with this book, I didn't want to make any like moral judgments. You know, it's a bit like, have you read Candide by Voltaire? Mm-hmm. I think the most powerful way to show people how broken our system is not for me to tell them it's broken. It's for me to take them with me, take them to the places I've been, take them to the top of the mountain and show them the tsunami that is coming. Mm-hmm. You know, and people can make their own judgments about whether it's right or whether it's wrong, you know. People who are interested can go and look at the work that I do now. They can look at my YouTube channel, and I think it's pretty clear where I stand on it. But, you know, I was a young kid. My job was to bet on the economy, and that's what I did. And it's, you know, it's not just me. You know, the best paid 10,000 economists in the world, all traders. All traders. They don't work for your governments. So that's the way the world is, I'm afraid. You know, I didn't make it that way.
We spoke at the beginning about that sort of the unhappiness that came from the work that you were doing, and it's really clear that you are so much happier now, having left that world and with the sort of new direction that things have taken. Is that the same thing as being hopeful about what the future holds, or are you still really concerned about, as you say, about how that economy is stacked?
You know, I'm a person who has made millions of pounds betting basically on the collapse of Western society. And I came to this kind of conclusion in 2011. And, you know, at that, I was 24 years old. And I wasn't like, this is definitely right. But I was confident enough to bet on it. And I bet big on it. And by the end of the year, I was the best trader in the world. And I got paid millions of pounds. And then I thought, okay, maybe this is not just a theory. But your job is still a trader, so you do it again, and you get paid like another fucking £1 million, you know what I mean? And then you're like, okay, still nobody's talking about it. You turn around and you look at these guys who are supposed to understand the economy. You know, you've read the book. Most of these guys are, at best, insane, at worst, idiots, right? And then you start thinking, okay, maybe we're in trouble here. But what do you do? You know, what do you do? You know, I was confident that things were going to get worse. There's this one conversation between me and this Arthur character where I'm like, should we do something? And he's like, well, we put the bet on, you know. Listen, in my heart of hearts, I am an economist, I'm an analyst, I'm a trading man. I make predictions. I am not hopeful. I look at what is around us. You know, when I was a trader, people had a lot of opinions. There's this line from JB in the book, opinions are like arseholes. Everybody's got one. I don't want to know people's opinions. I want to know what your bets are, okay? I work hard every day to try and stop the economic collapse. If you look at my bets, I'm betting on the collapse. Because that is what I think will happen. I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen. But, you know, this is a knowledge I carry around with me every day, and I've carried this knowledge around for 13 years. At the beginning of COVID, I knew this is going to be an unprecedented economic disaster. That's why I started my YouTube channel, because I want to tell people. And look, if I could stop this economic disaster, me, myself, it would be stopped, okay? I'm doing my best here. I've had to find ways to go forward as a person with this knowledge that I have. The way I deal with it, the way I cope with it, is I try my best to stop it. And that's what I do every day. And if people want to see the work that I do, my YouTube, my Instagram, my Twitter, my Twitter, it's all out there, you know. I feel better as somebody who knows it's happening and trying to stop it, rather than being somebody who just bets on it. But if you ask me if I'm hopeful, look, if I thought there was no chance, then I'd be on a beach in the Philippines somewhere drinking a pina colada. You know what I mean? I think we've got a chance here, but ultimately, it will depend on the people of this country and the people of the world. You know, are enough of them ready to put down their selfish motives and work together to fix a societal problem? I am, but you know, I'm in a luxury position where I don't need the money. You know, the question really will come down to the hearts and minds of the people of this country and the people of the world. So, you know, I know which side of the fence I'm on. If enough people join me, we can stop the disaster.
We began the chat talking about the title of the book, Trading Game. It has a subtitle, which is A Confession.
Yeah.
Just to finish off, what is it a confession about?
This subtitle, there was some conversation about this subtitle. So there's a genre of literature, right? Confessional literature, you know, talking about on the road, this kind of stuff. And I think this book very firmly falls into that genre. What I wanted this book to be was, as much as possible, completely honest. I didn't want to paint myself in a positive light. This is what I saw. This is what I saw, and it's what I lived. And I want you to see what I saw, and I want you to live what I lived. And I want you to feel what I felt. It's also a book that, in my opinion, makes a strong case that society is going to get significantly worse from here, in a lack of action, if we don't do anything about it, basically. Obviously, the subtitle raises questions about personal culpability. I think it's probably too much to put the collapse of Western society on me specifically. But you know, I was a young man. I was driven by lust for money, greed in many ways. But I was a young man living in poverty. Once I made money, I decided to walk away. You know, there are people in the book that I wouldn't say I treated the best consistently. People who read the book will see that. But I've come to terms with what I've done, and I try to make myself a positive force. For me, it's a confession in the sense that it's an honest story. It's from the heart. You know, it was not easy to write at times. You know, I put a lot of emotion into it. I put my heart into this. I think that's the only way. I think that's the best way to convince other people to believe the things that you believe. So it's confessional in the sense that it's real, and I hope that people experience that, and that helps people change their minds on some things and feel the way that I feel about where we are as a society.
Well, for this reader, it was, as you say, that honesty means that you as the reader are taken on a journey that I didn't know anything about before, but you live every day, every month, every moment through the book. So definitely worked for me, Gary. Thank you so much for giving me some time to talk to you about it.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.